Well, joining me now on the show is the Executive Director of the Henry Jackson Society, Dr. Alan Mendoza. Alan, always fantastic to have you on. We were all expecting the Military Day Parade to be an opportunity for Putin to claim some sort of victory. He's not been able to do that, but he has been getting out his sort of biggest and beastliest weapons with which, I suppose, to threaten the West. What do you make of it all?
Well, it's actually interesting that not only did he not declare a victory, but he didn't really announce an escalation of the war either. Obviously, he provided further justification from his perspective as to why he feels Russia is engaged in the conflict. Clearly, that's a message to his domestic audience, but he didn't go where people thought he might do in terms of a general mobilization to increase his forces in Ukraine. And therefore, you begin to wonder whether, he's beginning, if not to ramp it down as such, but to work out an exit strategy. So rather than escalation, he's chosen not to do so today. Doesn't mean we won't get an escalation, but it might also mean that for the first time he can see that he needs an exit route, and he's not going to provoke further by talking up his prospects.
Been doing is essentially talking up the threat of the West, reinforcing this sort of slightly unhinged idea that we are the aggressors and somehow Russia is the victim, as well as parading things like this doomsday plane from which he can control Russia in the event of nuclear war, something that I understand hasn't been on display for 12 years. Does that not show signs that he actually wants to ramp up tensions with the West and that there's a potential he could act on those?
Well, this parade always serves, if you like, as a sort of show of military strength and prowess for Russia. The fact he's got some new toys out, or old toys that haven't appeared for a while, merely, kind of show, again, it's for a domestic audience more than anything else. Of course, it could mean that, he's thinking of ramping things up, but I would have expected him to be a little more sort of forthright about what he intended to do today, rather than sort of the standard kind of tub-thumping speech he gave. It was tub-thumping which didn't seem to lead anywhere, and that's interesting, I think, in itself. Alex, I think what we're doing is playing the old game of Kremlinology. If you remember, at these marches back in the day, you would look to see who was standing where and work out who might be in the ascendancy. We're doing the same now with Putin, don't you think?
Yeah, Kremlinology, I do like that term. But, there are, again, reports out today from oligarchs who are reportedly very close to the Russian leader, concerned about his psychiatric health. And that leads me on to question, we are looking again at NATO expansion imminent in coming weeks if Finland and Sweden do indeed sign up to join the pact. Is this potentially creating a pretty heady and perilous cocktail, and should we not be looking to try, and if Putin is potentially looking at finding a way to creep out the back door and de-escalate things, should we not be building him some form of golden bridge?
Well, the Golden Bridge can't revolve around weakening our own security. It also can't revolve around allowing neighbours of Russia who are rightly fearful of their own security, given what he's done to Ukraine, and saying, no, we're going to leave you at his mercies. We won't include you in our defensive alliance. Remember, of course, Alex, it's a defensive alliance, not an offensive one. And we can't leave them out to dry should they wish to join. Now, there can be an exit strategy involving either his departure from the lands he's taken or some kind of deal that the Ukrainians themselves sign up to. But that's going to be really a cause of discussion between him and the Ukrainians to try and work out what that might look like. It might look like the status quo ante. I doubt it will look like that, but it might look like he gets certain bits, but the Ukrainians get certain bits as well, maybe EU membership. But there has to be some off-ramp for everyone. It can't be one-way traffic in Putin's direction, else the simple lesson for everyone will be that aggression pays off.
And today, Ben Wallace has likened the actions of Putin to Hitler, joining, I suppose, Hitler in calling the West the Nazis. Are these throwing about sort of, reflections, reminiscences of the horrors of World War II productive?
Well, unfortunately, the Russians have started this whole point by, going on about the Ukrainians being Nazis, using that language deliberately in order to provoke memories of the Great War, the Great Patriotic War amongst their people. And of course, if Putin starts something, you can't uncontested territory. You have to push back and say, what a ridiculous analogy. If anyone is acting like Hitler in this regard, it is you, in terms of seizing neighbours' lands and neighbours' sort of territory with no due course to do so. So from that perspective, it's not, of course, it's not helpful. You want it to be closed down, but let's not forget who has started it and who has continued to use that terminology. And it's not something we ought to allow him to lay claim to. It needs to be refuted, needs to be rebutted, because if even one person in Russia hears a rebuttal and recognises that what Putin is saying is nonsense, then it's a job well done by those of us in the West who, of course, recognise that he is, telling a pack of lies with his analogies.
And in terms of the pack of lies with those analogies, Russian state TV hijacked the other day with a message being sent to to Russians about the fact that blood is on their hands, essentially, if they go along with Putin's plans. Is the hope now that essentially someone's going to have the bravery to be able to stand up to Putin, potentially remove him from power some way or the other? And if that was the case, is there not an equal danger that his successor could be just as brutal, someone like Lavrov, for example?
Well, I don't think Lavrov will be his successor, number one. But even if it were Lavrov, he wouldn't be as brutal as Putin, because actually the next person coming would be interested in pursuing their own objectives and securing their own power. Now, quite clearly, if Putin had been removed by some internal coup or even by some external pressure of some kind that led to his departure, the new person would want to stamp their authority on Russia straight away. And the way to do that would not be to continue a losing war that Putin got them into, but instead to find a way to extricate themselves from that war on favourable terms, as in, I'm not Putin, therefore you can do a deal with me, and then turn Russia in a new direction. I'm pretty confident that whoever takes over from Putin will not be following the exact path of Putin. Doesn't mean they're going to be an angel, doesn't mean they will be a Democrat. But it would mean, I think, that this war would come to an end, because quite clearly the chief architect of this war and the person who wants to keep it going most is the man who started it, and that is Vladimir Putin.
Well, here's hoping that someone can indeed remove the man from power at some point, and sooner the better. Dr. Alan Mendoza, thank you ever so much for your insightful analysis. Well,